Hello and welcome to episode 428 of Geektown Radio. We are back from a very extended break. If you've seen on social media, we did record a show last week and the recording went horribly wrong. So unfortunately, that hasn't gone out. But we are back this week and I have with me Gray.
Hello. I'm not sounding like a chipmunk, I hope.
No, that was the weirdest thing. In 15 years of podcasting, I have never had a recording mess the audio up in such a bizarre way because it shifted everything up a tone. So you're sounding like slightly like chipmunks. I mean, that I could have dealt with, but it was also really scratchy and horrible. I don't know what is causing it. And we've had the same problem today. We usually record on Skype and we've switched over to recording on Zoom for this because for some reason it's still playing up even though I tested it earlier. So I have no idea what's going on with it, but hopefully this will all work perfectly well. It was all working fine before I went on holiday. So we've both been away, actually. I was away in America for a month or so and managed to catch up on a lot of TV since I've been back, since we're sort of, I've been back a week or so now. But what have you been up to?
Well, yeah, so I've been off for 3 months. So I have my little hiatus where I bury myself in a big pile of exam papers.
Yes.
And I've been listening to some of the guest hosts come on that have been sort of filling a little gap in the void. And I made a really big aim that I wasn't going to watch too much. I was just trying to reduce the amount I was watching. Just not long after the podcast, I counted and I was in the middle of watching about 45 different programs. And it was just too much. So I've completed loads without taking on loads of new ones, which means, sadly, I will have missed some great TV shows over the last few months. So I wanted to sort of strip that down to, I'm only watching about 12 or 13 things now, and obviously 3 or 4 of those are weekly shows. So before I tell you about my films, the film that I watched a couple of weeks ago, I will talk about some of the programs. I'll do a big list, Dave, rather than talking about them all individually. So if you want to speed this up in record, it's fine. So some of the shows I've completed since May are the final season of Station 19, Insomnia, Abbott Elementary, The Jinx Part 2, Trigger Point Part Season 2, Outlaw Season 3, Sugar, Serial Killer's Wife, Peacock, Lost Boys and Fairies, Big Door Prize, the last episodes of Doctor Who, SWAT, Fire Country, Trying, Not Dead Yet, The Mole, Spent, Abbott Elementary, and I'm not including all the FBIs, the Chicagos, the Equalizers that all finished in that time as well.
Wow.
So I absolutely stripped it down, got rid of quite a few things there. Oh, it's exhausting, some of those. I was finishing 3 or 4 a day at some points in June, just like the final episodes of things.
Where did Big Door Prize end? Because unfortunately that's been cancelled after 2 seasons. So that was one of the things I think while we were off. But where did it end?
I really struggled with it in terms of the point where I had to force myself to watch through it, because the first season was quite intriguing of where it was going to go, but I kind of didn't get the second season. And about 3 or 4 episodes in, I was like, should I have read the book? Is it a kind of thing where the book would make more sense than what I'm watching? So I don't want to spoil too much, but the residents of the town started seeing the next step of their lives being performed in some sort of computer game. And then the very last episode, it almost goes, are you ready? And we're about to go into the next step, and then it stops. I'm not hugely disappointed. It's not like something that I'm going to be like, oh, I'm really frustrated, because I think if you're a hardcore fan, you can go and read the book again. But I wasn't overwhelmed by it. I felt there were better things on my TV at the time, like Sugar, Colin Farrell's Sugar.
That was fantastic.
So that was really good.
Yeah.
I'm currently watching a few things, though. Obviously, I'm just trying to keep it all down to minimal. So I'm currently watching A Good Girl's Guide to Murder on BBC One. I read the book, so I wanted to follow it up. And I know it's Netflix everywhere else apart from the UK. It's on BBC. I literally just told you Jimmy Carr's come back for the second half of its season. That's weekly on Friday. Love that. Supacell on Netflix. I'm about 4 episodes into that. And obviously I'm well into Fire Country season 2 now, and that's really looking good.
Yeah, I've just started Fire Country season 2. I do really like that show. So you finished season 1 in that other list. So
yes.
Yeah, I thought it started off a bit shaky, but it found its feet fairly quickly. And there's some quite big changes in the second season as well, which moved the characters around.
Yeah, they've just done that backdoor pilot. I don't know if that was the last episode we were on. We talked about it. It must be been 3 months ago, the Backdoor Pilot starring Morena Baccarin. That's the episode I've just watched. And it's quite a good episode, the way she solves the crime. And she's the sheriff that comes in, and that's going to obviously be the next Sheriff Country, was it? Is the spin-off?
Yes.
Something like that.
Sheriff Country, I think.
Yeah, so that's really good. I know I've got a couple of other programs I want to follow up on. I know that I'm about 2 episodes of finishing Cleaning Lady season 2 as well, so I want to get ready for season 3. I want to watch The Jetty and Ghost US, which I know are both on BBC, but BBC's flooded with Olympics. Every time I turn it on to watch a BBC show, I end up watching an Olympics. So that's my TV stuff.
I do want to watch The Jetty because that sort of came out whilst I was away. Ghost US, I really, really, really enjoy. I know some people take issue with it because of the fact that it's a US version of a UK show, but it's a really, really well done one. And it's different enough from the UK version, but has the same sort of vibe to it. I mean, it's obviously not as British, but that's sort of the whole point. I think they've done a really nice job in how they've handled that. How was Supercell?
Supercell, I really struggled with the first episode. I didn't think the acting was great, but it really has found its feet as it's moved through. It was a little bit too out there. I thought it was a little bit too much, but it's like Tosin Cole, brilliant actor. Like, I really like him. I mean, he was leading the charge, and I felt like a lot of the characters around him weren't as strong. But as you've got further down, I'm on episode 4, I think I just watched. You know, there are a couple of actors in there that have appeared, like blink and you'll miss them. So I'm hoping they're going to come further into the later parts. So Eddie Marsan, I'm sure I saw Eddie Marsan's face in episode 1. I've seen him once since. And the other actress is, she's in Trying. She plays the sister, and she's also the lead in Blue Lights. Sian
Brooke, possibly.
Sian Brooke, yeah. And I'm pretty certain I saw her there. So I'm hoping 2 episodes left. I'm sort of interspersing that with a few other things at the moment. Yeah. But I think, has it been renewed for season 2?
Supercell, not yet, but it's not been out that long, so I don't know. I mean, it's Netflix, so I mean, it could go either way with that. It will. I've not seen a lot of talk about it, so we'll see. I don't hold out a huge amount of hope for that coming back, particularly because, you know, those sort of things tend to need to hit fairly big to be able to land a second season on Netflix. But we'll see. I mean, I think it is an interesting one because it's a sort of British superhero thing. So I'm intrigued by that one. I do need to go and try and catch that up on that at some point.
And then the big thing, I'm trying to watch more films this summer as I've got a bit more time. And I started off my season of watching more films by rushing back from my holiday and a wedding and getting out to see, obviously, the highly, highly anticipated Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yes.
And I know I sent you a few sentences about it last week, but it was a really, really good reset, return to form, honorary of the Fox catalogue, full of Easter eggs, full of cameos, and it didn't take itself too seriously, but there were that moments of light and dark where you could see where the storyline was going to make it kind of fit where it needed to go. I think Jackman and Reynolds together are just delightful, and I just absolutely enjoyed every moment, and the whole of the cinema screen that I watched enjoyed it. I've so far not seen anyone be negative about it. I know there was a journalist in a certain press that absolutely floored it the day before it was released, but everyone is questioning where they came from. It's like they didn't get the joke, or it's like their first time watching Marvel, and that has actually been poo-pooed. It's sort of saying it's rescued. The figures speak for themselves.
Yes.
And, you know, I think it's absolutely brilliant addition. And actually, I was thinking about this the other day. Its post-credit sequence almost mocks the idea of post-credit sequences as well, because we're becoming so obsessed with it. And it was quite a good post-credit sequence, but you didn't need it. It didn't tease to what was coming next. And it was almost like, oh, you waited for this long, did you? And I know Deadpool's good at doing that. Like, you're expecting a post-credit sequence. Okay, here we go. But no, really enjoyed that. And Dave, I know you haven't been to cinema for a while. I would recommend seeing it on the big screen. Is epic.
Yes, it is
a really good.
Probably the only film that's been out for a long while that would actually get me to go to the cinema. I do want to go and see it. I am trying to figure out some time when I can actually kind of go and find a cinema that's, because I mean, the problem is where I am, there aren't any cinemas that close. So I do want to go out and see it, though. It is one that will actually get me to go to the cinema for it because it looks fantastic. The reviews have been, like you say, positive across the board, pretty much. I mean, I haven't seen any negative reviews of it anywhere. There've been some great reviews. The box office numbers are insane, and I'm so glad that it's landed so well. I think we have got some, obviously, it was SDCC last week, and we've got some more MCU news from that as well. And I think it may be at a point where they're finally kind of breathing a bit of life back into it, We'll see.
I think they're trying to be a bit more sensible about it. And there are a lot of nods to maybe even where Fox tried to overdo things a little bit. And I think that's where you bring some of the cameos in. So I got back from there and thought I'm going to start my film watching and watch some of those films I should have watched in the last year. And I'm not doing too well. It's the 5th of August when we're recording this today, and I've only watched one. And I was trying to do like one every other day or try and boost it a little bit. So I watched the Olivia Colman-headed up Wicked Little Letters, which was last year. If anyone remembers this, it's sort of set in Littlehampton in the 1900s. And it's about a set of poison pen letters that are sent in this little village of Littlehampton.
Right.
That is actually based on a true story. Oh, it's so good. Olivia Colman is just fantastic. And it's got Lolly Adefope appears in it as well. The Irish actress Jessie Buckley in it, taking sort of like co-lead alongside Olivia. But no, it's a really enjoyable little watch, and some great English actors sort of supporting the cast there. And I remember seeing it as a trailer last year and thought, I'd love to go and see that. And then it popped up on Netflix. I went, oh, this is part of my new film watching for August. I'm going to watch it. So, and there are a few more on my list. Hopefully by the end of August, I'll watch a few more films. That's my dream. So that's me. Dave, you've obviously got loads to talk about because you've had your long holiday as well. So what have you watched in the last couple of weeks?
Well, I mean, since I've been back, I've caught up with The Boys. So I'm finished the season of that, finished The Acolyte. I'm up to date on House of the Dragon with the exception of the finale, which has just gone out. So I will be watching that later. The Boys really enjoyed this season. I think they did a great job in setting that up for the final season. Interestingly, they've spun it around kind of to the same point that the finale of the book run had. There's a lot of divergence between the comic book series and the TV show in terms of the plot lines and some of the characters and how they interact and all that sort of stuff. But they have actually almost come to a similar kind of point, particularly with Butcher. So not entirely the same, but they've managed to navigate it to the same sort of point, which I think is interesting and is going to make for a very, very good final season. The Acolyte I enjoyed, but I don't know.
I'm hearing negative things as well. Like a few of my friends are like, ugh.
I mean, it was okay. I think it needed to be better. They were sort of introduced some interesting characters and then killed them off. And you're like, okay. I think they could have done more. And I think they needed to flesh that world out a lot more than they did. The High Republic is an area which is covered a lot in the comic books, and this has been the first sort of TV series for it. And the comic books, I think, do a lot better job of setting out that world and how things work and interact and that sort of stuff. And I just don't think this was what it needed to be. I think it's enjoyable enough, and if you're a Star Wars fan, you know, a lot of Jedi with lightsabers and that sort of thing, and they're interesting enough characters. The acting was generally fine, but just wasn't quite there. One of the other things I watched was the Brats documentary, which is a documentary film from Andrew McCarthy. Brats is him exploring the history of the Brat Pack, which I'm sure as somebody that taught film, you know who the Brat Pack were. They were a group of people that worked together, which was sort of Emilio Estevez, Ali Sheedy, Timothy Hutton, Demi Moore, Rob Lowe, Lisa Thompson, John Cryer, and Andrew McCarthy, and a bunch of other people as well that are sort of connected in some way. Judd Nelson, Anthony Michael Hall, Molly Ringwald. It's never a sort of definitive, these are the people in the Brat Pack, but there was a bunch of people that were of a similar age that worked together, particularly on movies for people like John Hughes, like The Breakfast Club, like St. Elmo's Fire, like Class, which were fantastic films. I mean, I loved these movies. I grew up in this era. It's really Andrew McCarthy exploring how being branded the Brat Pack as a group of young actors affected their lives and their careers, and how they saw it as a negative thing at the time. The name was given to them by a reporter who was interviewing Emilio Estevez, and it came across as a sort of slightly snarky, negative sort of thing at the time. It's a really interesting look at how that affected particularly Andrew and some of the others and their thoughts on it. You know, he interviews various people about it, not everybody, but people like Emilio and Demi Moore and Rob Lowe, and interviews them about their thoughts on it and how it affected them having that label attached to them. If you are of a certain age and you grew up with those Brat Pack movies, it's a really, really interesting documentary. It's about an hour and a half. It's on Disney Plus if you want to go and find it here. Have you caught that one yet? Because it is there.
When I saw it, I was like, I bet that's about the Brat Pack. But for those even younger people than us that might be listening, I know that Charlie XCX is trying to has started the Brat rebrand and called Kamala Harris Brat, and now this very luminous green with black writing. I did Brighton Pride at the weekend, and there were loads of people suddenly following this Brat. So don't get confused, everyone. This is a very different Brat documentary. It's not quite Charlie XCX yet.
No,
I'd heard of it, but I'm very aware of those. The Breakfast Club team. I remember seeing the modelling pose they did I think it was for Vogue maybe back in the day to sort of set up this Brat Pack. So yeah, I do remember it.
Yes, I think as somebody who has taught film and is interested in sort of history of film, it is one that's definitely worth you watching. It's quite intriguing to see it from their perspective because, I mean, I never saw it as a particularly negative thing, but they really did. And it's interesting to see how it affected them. That's called Brats. It's on Disney Plus at the moment. Over on Netflix, there is a fantastic animated series, which is just brilliant, called Exploding Kittens, which is based on the popular sort of card/board game. And
I played that.
It's sort of a version of Russian roulette, but with kittens. So you draw cards, and at one point you'll get an exploding kitten card. They made an animated TV show out of it. And when they announced it, I was very kind of skeptical as to how this would work. And then they announced Tom Ellis would be the voice of God or God Cat, because the entire premise of this is that heaven is not particularly good. And the board of heaven have decided that God needs to reconnect with humans, so send him back to Earth as an overweight house cat. That's the basic premise of it. It turns out that the same thing has happened with Beelzebub in hell, and Beelzebub has also been sent back from their board. So there is now a devil cat and a god cat on Earth. He's sent to live with a family called the Higgins family, who are very, very dysfunctional. It is just very, very well done. It's extremely funny. It's probably a sort of 12-ish rating, so it's not like quite Rick and Morty level of gross out stuff or even Solar Opposites. It's slightly lower level than that, but it still scratches that sort of itch. It's in that kind of area. Very funny. The references are great. Really good voice cast. Tom Ellis as God. Shahir Zamata as Devil Cat in there as well. Really good, well animated, highly entertaining, very epic sort of over-the-top battles. I actually interviewed the composers for this show whilst I was over in LA. That interview will be going out soon. It's really, really funny, and definitely one to add to your list if you like those sort of slightly more adult animations. Another animated series over on Prime was The Batman Cape Crusader. This is the new Batman series from Bruce Timm, who is the main driving force behind the original Batman animated series. And I think that's almost part of the problem with it. It's an odd one because if you go in thinking, oh great, they're basically reviving Batman the animated series, it isn't that. It's sort of an alt history thing. It's set in the sort of, 40s, 50s Gotham, which is fine. I mean, the original animated series had that sort of aesthetic, although it didn't specify a particular time period. But this is very, very firmly set in that sort of 40s, 50s era. But they've made some very, very odd choices. Like the opening episode has Penguin in it, but they've gender switched Penguin to be female. And okay, that's fine, but they don't make any real use of the fact that they've done that. So if you're going to make such major changes to characters, I kind of feel that you need to actually do something with it. And it's just an odd choice. Things like they made the drawing of Alfred traditionally in the animated form. He's always been the Alfred's the sort of skinny butler with a moustache. In this one, he's kind of a short, fat guy, and you're like, okay, but there doesn't seem to be any real reason for going down that route for a version of Alfred that's different to what people would have expected. There's some odd changes to that, and the characterizations are different. Like there is a version of Harvey Dent in there. He's just one-dimensional, sort of over-the-top, snarky sort of DA character, and it doesn't seem to quite hit the mark, which is a shame. And I think had they just done a straight revival of the original animated series, I think it would have landed a lot better. And I can understand maybe Bruce Timm wanting to go in a slightly different direction and sort of feel that he'd done it already and he wanted to do something different. But I don't feel this quite works. I mean, the animation's good. The storytelling is okay. I think the problem is that people will go in expecting it to be one thing and it's something completely different. So I'm only a couple of episodes into it, but it's not quite landing how it should, I think, for that. And I'm sort of seeing why DC, or rather WB, who own the property, decided not to air it on their platform and decided to sort of move it on. I think it's an odd one, that. But that's on Prime if you want to go and check that out. I've also started a couple of other shows. Interview with the Vampire Season 2, that has been back. I really, really like what they did with the first season of that. I think the second season is off to a great, great start. They've moved things forward, so you're sort of in 1940s post-war. You're following Claudia and Louis as they sort of head across to Europe. It's interesting. I don't know how much Lestat is actually in this series. He does pop up in sort of dream sequences and kind of visions to Louis in the opening episode, but I don't know whether that's the only way we're going to see him in this, because end of season 1, they apparently killed him. I mean, if you know the books, you know they didn't, but Lestat isn't with them for most of this book, so because the seasons seem to be following the books. However, the next book does follow Lestat rather a lot more, so I'm not sure how they're going to be dealing with that moving forward, but you get more of Armand in this one as well. But yeah, that's been really, really good. Do you know the books, or have you watched any of the show?
I only remember when I was younger watching the film without I wasn't supposed to, but I didn't really want to get back into it when it came through. And I've heard good reviews, and I knew the second season was coming. I didn't actually know. It must be one of the ones they dropped to cover people who weren't interested in the Olympics, to add it to the box set. Because I know loads of stuff suddenly got dropped about 2 weeks ago, and it's like, that's to help people who don't want to watch the Olympics. But no, it never really inspired me to go back and watch it.
It is very different to the film. It's a really nice take in that they've moved the years around, and it makes it far more interesting. And that's one of the points where, unlike the Batman series, where they've made sort of changes that don't really do anything for the story, with the changes that they make to this, such as changing the race of Louis, it's integrated as part of the story and works really, really well. So you can make changes to properties, but if you're going to do it, have a reason for doing it and make sure that it works. And I think this is a really, really good adaptation of those books. Second season is now on iPlayer, so you can go and check that out. Started The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon as well. A couple of episodes into that. It's nice to see Daryl back on screen. I like what they're doing with the opening episode. This is Daryl having washed up in the shores of France for reasons that we don't quite know. I mean, he was sort of, I think last we saw him, he was out searching the world, and all he's really said is he got into some trouble, ended up on a boat, and now he's in France. It's almost got a little bit of a sort of Last of Us vibe in that he's been tasked with taking a kid from point A to point B across France with a couple of other people. If you like Norman Reedus, and he's always been great as that character, it's more Daryl. The second season, which is being simulcast with the US, that is going to land on Sky as well, and that introduces Carol back into the show. She was supposed to be in season one, and then the actress couldn't actually make the trip for a variety of personal reasons at the time. So they did the first season with just Daryl, and now they're introducing Carol for the second season. He's coming back for a third season as well, they have announced, which moves the action from France to Spain. So that's going to have a slightly different vibe as well. And Quantum Leap season 2 is, unfortunately, the final season is now all up on Paramount Plus. Really, really enjoying that show. Such a shame that they decided not to keep it going. Apparently, the second season doesn't end on like a cliffhanger. I don't know whether it wraps well. I will let you know when I get to the end of it, but I'm a few episodes into that. But really enjoying that show. It's a shame because they did a really good job in taking the original premise and expanding it in slightly different directions. So it wasn't just a sort of straight up remake of the original. They used the original as the history of it, and it's a rebooted, updated version of Quantum Leap, but works really well in terms of how they've structured it. So it's a real shame that they decided not to bring that back. But that's on Paramount Plus over here. You can check that out there. I think that's all the stuff I've been doing. Any comments on anything, or should we move on?
No, we've got such a different list to each other this time around. I know The Boys is on my long list, but I've written a few things down in my notes about what you've said, and I think I saw the advert for the Cape Crusader came on this afternoon, literally just before I came onto this podcast, and I was like, I think we're talking about that today. But hearing your review doesn't make me want to rush and see it now.
No,
but The Boys definitely do. Brats does sound interesting. Exploding Kittens is up there for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think you'll love Exploding Kittens. And I do think the Brats documentary is well worth checking out. Boys has always been great. So yeah, go and check that out on Prime as well. That's everything we've been doing this week. Let's move on to some TV and film news. So we kick off the TV and film news with the renewals, cancellations and pickups. There were, of course, quite a few cancellations and renewals while we were off. American Rust cancelled by Prime Video, which is its second cancellation because it was originally cancelled by Showtime, rescued for a second season by Prime, and now Prime have cancelled it. So that's not coming back, but I think that is very, very dead at this point. They've also cancelled Outer Range after 2 seasons on Prime as well. Halo was cancelled by Paramount Plus after 2 seasons, which is a real shame, but it is looking for a new home. Whether it'll find one, I don't know. It is made by Sony, so I mean, it could potentially end up anywhere. If they are going to continue it, it needs a decent budget. Prime would be the obvious people to pick that up, I would have thought. I enjoyed the first couple of seasons. I know it has very little connection directly to the storyline of the video games, but I think they did an interesting job with it as a sort of alt version of the universe. So we'll see what happens with that. Reginald the Vampire cancelled after 2 seasons on Sci-Fi, so that has gone. Make or Break cancelled after 2 seasons on Apple TV. That's apparently a surfing docuseries, which I was unaware of, but it is there. Life and Beth, which is Amy Schumer's Hulu series that was on Disney Plus here, that's been cancelled after 2 seasons. Squid Game Season 2 has a premiere date and has also been not so much a cancellation as a renewal, but it's a renewal for a final season, so it is a sort of ending as well. Squid Game, that has a premiere date for Season 2, which is 26th of December, so something to do on Boxing Day. It has been renewed for the 3rd and final season as well, which, I mean, given that it's a Korean series, and Korean series generally don't last after 2 seasons maximum, the fact that it's got a 3rd shows you how big a show that is, because Korean shows generally don't make more than a couple of seasons of shows. It's just the way their TV works. So that's sort of interesting that they've come back for a 3rd season. And Disney Plus cancels Renegade Nell after 1 season as well. So that has gone, which is a shame. That's from Sally Wainwright as well, that one. The person behind Happy Valley and Gentleman Jack and all those massive hits. So it's a rare sort of miss although the show itself got really positive reviews, it just didn't find an audience by the sounds of it. But people that saw it seemed to really, really like it. So it's not that it was a bad show. It just, for whatever reason, didn't get the audience it needed. In terms of renewals, Crapopolis has been renewed for season 4 by Fox. I don't think that's ever actually found a UK home yet.
Never heard of it. Season 4 as well.
Yeah, it's from Dan Harmon, who is one of the people behind things like Rick and Morty. He was the other half, the less problematic half of Rick and Morty, and Community as well was the other big thing that he did. Yeah, that's been renewed for a 4th season. Blood of Zeus has been renewed for a 3rd and final final season at Netflix, so that's a sort of another ending renewal. As I mentioned, Daryl Dixon renewed for a third season by AMC and moving the action to Spain. Solar Opposites renewed for a sixth season at Hulu and Disney Plus, which I'm very, very happy about. That's awesome news.
Can't wait for that to come back.
Yeah. Prime Video renewed 3 of its animated series, Has Been Hotel, which was renewed for a third and fourth season, Invincible for a fourth season, and Sausage Party Foodtopia has renewed for a second season as well, so that's all back. Loot, the Maya Rudolph series on Apple, that's been renewed for a third season. Presumed Innocent renewed for a second season after becoming Apple TV's most watched drama. That was a bit of a surprise because they announced that as a limited series when it first came out, and then they decided that it was such a big hit they were going to make more of it. Don't know whether it's going to continue with Jake Gyllenhaal, although he's on board, I think, as an EP, but might not be on screen. It may follow an entirely different case and be more of an anthology series for the second season. They haven't really announced any more detail other than saying they are bringing it back.
I really do want to watch it. I heard really good things about it. And now they said it's going to be on again, I think it would. I think I was watching Sugar at the time. It was taking my time to get through it and it was keep being advertised. I thought, or maybe when I go back onto it, I'll watch it. But yeah, that's definitely on my list.
Yeah, worth checking out. I have seen some of that. The problem is I had it on while I was doing other things and it's not the best way to watch it. I need to actually go back and watch it properly from the start. Completely Made Up Ventures of Dick Turpin has been renewed for a second season by Apple TV as well. That's the Neil Fielding comedy series, which I saw a few episodes of. That was quite enjoyable, but they've renewed that for a second season as well, so that will be back. In terms of pickups and other news, The Walking Dead Dead City Season 1 has been given a premiere date coming the 22nd of August. That's earlier than I thought they were probably going to drop it. I thought they'd probably hold on to that until after the second season of Daryl Dixon, but they're bringing Dead City out on the 22nd of August. The second season of that goes out in 2025 in the US. I suspect they'll simulcast the second season the same way they're doing with Daryl Dixon Season 2. That's the reason all the Walking Dead shows were shown in the opposite order to how they were shown in the US, because The Ones Who Live is a single season, so that came out first. Then they knew that the second season of Daryl Dixon was coming out in September, so they wanted to make sure they ran the first season before the second season came out, and they knew Dead City was coming out in 2025, so they put that last. They're not directly connected. They're all part of the same universe, but there's no actual crossover between any of the seasons, so there's no reason to actually air them in the same order that they aired in the US. That's Negan and Maggie in the Dead City series. They head to Manhattan. So I'm looking forward to that one coming out, but 22nd of August for that. Silo Season 2 has a premiere date now. That's coming out November 15th. They've announced on Apple, which I loved the first season of that. It was absolutely superb. That's another one that you need to watch on if you've not caught that one on Apple. That was really, really brilliant. So November 15th for Season 2 of that, which is great. Star Wars Skeleton Crew has been given a premiere date as well. This is the one with Jude Law as a sort of, well, it looked like he was a Jedi in the original sort of clips and trailer that we saw. And he's now saying he's not a Jedi, but he is a sort of Force user. But it's sort of Star Wars does Goonies, by the sounds of it, because it is him sort of with a young group of kids. And it's got that sort of warm kind of fuzzy nostalgic vibe to it, apparently. They've released a couple more pictures of it. It looks like it's going to be an interesting sort of adventure series for that. It's a different kind of area for Star Wars, but I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be an interesting one. But 3rd of December for that. Jude Law is the sort of main lead in it. And whilst we're off, the Suits LA pilot, which we talked about a few times, has been picked up to series by NBC. This is the show that stars Stephen Amell and Josh McDermott of Walking Dead, and Brian Greenberg, who was in One Tree Hill and Mindy Project, and Lex Scott Davis, who's in The First Purge and Rebel. So those are the 4 leads for it. It's sort of Suits adjacent. It is a sort of spin-off, but there's no characters from the original show. It's a spin-off in the same way that, you know, CSI New York was a spin-off of CSI. It's that sort of thing. So entirely new cast, set in a law firm, this time in LA, similar sort of vibe to it, but not directly connected. Although Stephen Amell's character had originally come from New York, so there is a connection back to New York, and there is a possibility that throughout the run you could get some of the original characters from the original show making guest appearances. But I like the look of this. I'm glad they've picked it up to series. The pilot was shot, I think, in Vancouver. They've actually agreed that they're moving the show down to LA to actually film it, which makes far more sense because it means you can use a lot more LA landmarks and stuff when you're shooting it. So it makes sense to shoot it in the town. It's surprising how much stuff doesn't get shot in LA when it's actually set in LA. Any interest in this?
I never watched the original, but you know that you've got that itch, like maybe I will watch the new one and then it might take me back. I know they're all available on iPlayer, even though they've been available on Netflix before. Yeah. But yeah, there's a part of me that wants to watch it. I do like things like this, but I obviously missed the boat the first time round.
Yeah, and there are like 7 seasons or something to get through of the original show. But the original show is well worth watching. I mean, it's really, really well put together. And the LA spin-off, I think, is an interesting one, and I'm glad they picked it up to series. Before we get into some of the other news, you may or may not be aware that there is actually another SAG-AFTRA strike going on at the moment, this time with video game actors. So those are people that do voices, the motion capture, performance capture, all that sort of stuff. They are actually on strike against a number of video game companies at the moment. It's not been as widely publicized, obviously, as the actor and writer strike last year. You're not necessarily going to see a huge amount of impact on this immediately because of how video games works and the long lead times on them. But they're striking over the use of AI and the lack of AI protection because video games are one place where that really is a huge, huge potential issue. It's hard to say exactly which games will be affected due to the secrecy around upcoming releases because quite often they don't announce who the acting talent is for those big AAA video games. One of the games that they said won't be affected is, or they've said games that were in development before September 2023 aren't affected. So big titles like the obvious one being Grand Theft Auto 6, that won't be affected by this. Either the work has already been done or they have a deal in place because of the fact that the development was already well underway before September last year. Those games are exempt from the strike. So it's mainly things moving forward, which again comes back to the secrecy over the upcoming releases. But the reason they're striking is they have been some protections given to actors, but the protections only extend to on-camera performances and voice performances under their offer if the performer is identifiable in the output of the AI digital replica. So the example that they then give is, say, for example, you're the stunt performer or you're doing motion capture for a Spider-Man game, and they then use that to train an AI to do other bits of performance. You're then not getting paid for that, and you are not covered under the protections because of the fact that what person's seeing on screen is Spider-Man. They're not seeing your face or hearing your voice. So that's a bit of a problem, and they're trying to work out a way of making that fairer. The strike rules are sort of similar to what they were last time in that they won't be able to work or promote any games or studio that are part of current deadlock negotiations or who haven't already signed onto one of its existing agreements. You may find that actors are reluctant at Comic Cons to talk about games from struck companies. So for things like MCM, I don't know whether that's going to reduce the number of video game voice actors that are there or what. We'll have to wait and see how that affects things, because that was where it sort of affected stuff last time. I just wanted to highlight that there is a strike going on out there. You can find more online about that, about the SAG-AFTRA video games actors strike, if you want to go and support them about that. Moving on to some of the news, San Diego Comic-Con, of course, happened whilst we were off. There were a few big MCU announcements, as I mentioned earlier. The big one being the 5th Avengers movie being renamed Avengers Doomsday, and the announcement that Robert Downey Jr. will be back in the MCU, but not as Iron Man, as classic Fantastic Four villain Doctor Doom. He is going to be coming back as, which is an interesting change. I think it's quite clever, because it is a good way of getting Robert Downey back without trampling all over the sacrifice that Tony Stark made, which is something that they said they didn't want to do by bringing back a version of Iron Man. So I think this is kind of an interesting one, and it's a great character for him to get his teeth into.
I'd been on holiday, and so when I got back and I saw this news, I was so confused. And so on the way to see Deadpool and Wolverine, I had to get my friend to try and explain it to me. I was like, so how is this happening? Is it multiversal? Is it? And so like he was talking me through the probability is he's going to be a derivative of the Stark family. And I was just like, oh my word. It was good because they really respect him. But some people are calling it like, are they trying to get RDJ to rescue it a little bit? I think it's helping solve the big Kang problem. I get that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm excited by it. Definitely excited by it. And I'm glad that he didn't turn his back completely on the cinematic universe and there is still room for him.
Yeah, he sort of left because he'd done it for sort of 10 years and, you know, he went out on a high and he wanted to go and do some other film roles. And like the first film that he does is Oppenheimer after he leaves and ends up winning an Oscar for it. So it's one of those things that I think maybe he's got that bug out of his system now. and he's like, well, okay, I'll go back. Because I mean, I think one thing with Robert Downey Jr. is I think he has an awful lot of appreciation for the MCU because it really made his career. And people forget that when he was cast in Iron Man, they had to fight the studio. Jon Favreau fought the studio to get him cast in that because he was coming off the back of being a complete mess, having drugs and alcohol issues and all that sort of stuff. He was sort of sober, but they had to fight hard to get him into that role. And it was a fantastic bit of casting. So I think he does have a lot of respect for the MCU, and I'm glad that he's found a way of coming back. I believe that he said he would only do it if the Russo brothers came back and directed, which they are doing. They're going to direct both Doomsday and Secret War, which is the 6th Avengers movie. So they're back at the helm for those as well, which I think is great. One thing that when the announcement came out, he came out and said, new mask, same task, which is doing a short little statement, but it does possibly say a lot about what Doom is in this universe. Doom is a very interesting character in the comic books in that he has worked both sides. He has been a goodie, he has been a baddie. I mean, he's more a sort of villain, but he has been on both sides. So I think this is going to be kind of interesting. That does make me wonder whether it's going to take the Tony Stark goal from Age of Ultron about putting a suit of armor around the world, and whether Doom is taking that kind of idea but in a slightly more brutal Doctor Doom sort of way. It's a really intriguing one. I'm very happy to have Robert Downey Jr. back. So we'll see where that goes, but that was one of the big announcements. They did reveal a little bit more about the Fantastic Four themselves as well. That's got a subtitle to their movie. It's now called First Steps. It's interesting that, I mean, they've always said that it was going to be a sort of period film. We now know that it's going to take place in this sort of retro 90s, 60s future. It's not going to be on the main MCU Earth, which is 616, I think. And it's not going to be an origin story. So they're going to be established because we don't need to go through and do the Fantastic Four origin again. We've seen it a couple of times already. We do know that the Fantastic Four are going to be showing up, obviously in First Steps, but also in those Avengers movies, which does rather imply that they're going to get shoved into the Earth 616 at some point. And we also know that the First Steps film features Galacticus, who is known as the Devourer of Worlds. So it does make me wonder whether this film will end with the Fantastic Four losing their Earth to Galacticus and getting shoved or escaping in some way onto Earth 616. Whilst it's also not confirmed, it would make sense if this is the reality that Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom comes from as well, as a possibility, because he is a Fantastic Four villain. There's sort of an interesting thing going on with that. I like the idea of the sort of retro future aesthetic that they're going for this, and it being a different Earth and all that sort of stuff. I think that's sort of interesting.
I am looking forward to it. I know that someone said to me, was I watching like one of those trails that you find online, that one of the films will end end in defeat, similar to what we had in Avengers. And that will be a spiral to allow a lot of the crossovers to happen a little bit more freely. And I felt this was all sort of tied in. And on that trip to the cinema, my friend was saying about Galactus being revealed as the big enemy for the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
I felt like I've taken a bit of a back step to it for a while, and I want to get back into it now that we've got Deadpool and Wolverine, and with all this news coming out. But there's so many feeds that you watch where they're talking about moving timelines and change. And sometimes you don't know which ones to trust, because some of them are fan-based and some of them are creating AI posters of their dreams. And so sometimes I'm a little bit cautious about what I believe until like an official release date is set up. But it does intrigue me again.
Yeah, those two movies particularly, I think, definitely have my interest. There was a little bit of information about Captain America Brave New World, which is a film which is coming far sooner than the other two. Giancarlo Esposito was on stage, revealed who he was playing, which is the King of the Serpent Society, Seth Volker, a.k.a. Sidewinder. Volker is an economics professor before Roxxon Oil Company chemically mutated him and gave him powers to teleport, starting his criminal career as Sidewinder. He goes on to form the Serpent Society, a group of snake-themed supervillains. We knew Giancarlo was in it, and I mean, Giancarlo's a phenomenal actor and just brilliant to have him in there. Not a very well-known villain particularly, but I think that's sort of interesting to have him in there. And there was a little bit about Thunderbolts. There was a trailer shown for that. They haven't, I think, put that trailer up online at all, but they described it, people that saw the trailer, as being very much a James Gunn's The Suicide Squad vibe to it, which is an interesting kind of new addition to the MCU as sort of maybe slightly more adult and dealing with that, which of course, I mean, is sort of the area that Deadpool has always operated in. So I don't know what rating they're going for that, but that's sort of interesting to have that kind of Suicide Squad group in there, which is cool. There was another big panel for Star Trek as well as the MCU. Strange New Worlds Season 3 got a little bit of a trailer, which is up online. You can go and see that on the website. Showed the team being turned into Vulcans for an away mission, which is just really, really funny, and really enjoyed that clip that was up there. There was a little bit of casting announced as well. Killian O'Sullivan from In From the Cold and Then You Run. He's taking on the legacy role of Dr. Roger Corby, a character first introduced in the original series. He was a professor and ex-fiancé of Christine Chapel, who ended up having his consciousness transformed into an android body after being badly injured on a planet with an ancient android civilization. Although, of course, at this point in the timeline, that's all in his future. So I don't know whether this is introducing him as a love interest for Christine Chapel, or whether she's already his past fiancé. I'm not sure where that bit of it fits, but he's going to be a recurring guest star in the upcoming season. So that's interesting news. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, that has a premiere date now, which is the 24th of October. There was also a trailer for it. I'm very sad it's the final season because this is very, very, very funny, that show. There is going to be the final season of that. And Starfleet Academy, we knew some of the cast already for that, but they've now confirmed a number of the legacy characters that are joining that show. We knew Holly Hunter was going to be Captain and Chancellor of Starfleet Academy. Paul Giamatti is going to be the first season's antagonist, who is a man of an ominous past connected to the cadets. British comedian and actor Gina Yashir, who is probably best known to American audiences for Bob Hart's Soshola, but she's done a bunch of sort of panel shows and stand-ups and all that sort of thing over here. So you probably recognize her if you see her, but she's starring in a recurring role as an academy instructor. Legacy characters joining are Tig Nicotero as Jet Reno, who is a phenomenal character, Odin Ferrier as Admiral Vance, and Mary Wiseman, as we all suspected, is going to be returning as Tilly. Great, they're all back in. Robert Picardo, they've also announced, will reprise his role as the Doctor from Star Trek Voyager, which he recently reprised that role in voice form for Star Trek Prodigy, which is out now on Netflix for its second season. But good set of legacy characters in there. And Star Trek live-action comedy, they also announced was in development from Tawny Newsome, who is one of the stars of Lower Decks, plays Mariner, and Dear White People's Justin Simeon as well. Centers on some Federation outsiders who are serving on a gleaming resort planet only to find that their day-to-day exploits are being broadcast to the entire quadrant in a sort of Truman Show type kind of setup by the sounds of it, which I think is a really interesting, weird, off-the-wall idea for a live-action version of a series. Some interesting Star Trek news in there. I don't know where you sit with the Star Trek stuff. I can't remember whether you watched any of it or not.
Do you notice how quiet I've been?
Yes, I thought that was probably the case. Yeah,
I'll stay quiet during this one.
Fair enough. There was a couple of other TV shows that got panels as well. Dexter got a surprising amount of information. They released an intro for Original Sin, which is the prequel, which is a sort of new take on the original Dexter opening series with Dexter and family making breakfast and getting ready for their day. They also revealed that Michael C. Hall will be doing the sort of inner monologue of the young Dexter in that. The young Dexter in that show is played by Patrick Gibson from Shadow and Bone. Christian Slater plays Harry Morgan, his dad, and you've got Molly Brown from Senior playing Deborah in that. Also, Sarah Michelle Gellar is guest starring as CSI chief and Dexter's new boss, because the entire thing with the prequel is it's just after he graduates and gets a job at Miami Metro, and he's just starting his sort of serial killing career as well. But as well as the prequel, they announced a sequel series called Dexter Resurrection. That will be starring Michael C. Hall on camera, and seems to imply that Dexter somehow survived the ending of Dexter New Blood, which was the sort of sequel series that introduced a son, Harrison, and spoilers for the end of that, but Dexter didn't survive the end of New Blood, and Clyde Phillips, who is the creator of it, categorically stated that Dexter was dead. So whether he's changed his mind on that, or whether this show maybe will follow Harrison, with Dexter taking up the role as Harrison's sort of mental guide in the same way that Harry did in the original Dexter, we don't know. There's been an interview with Michael C. Hall which seems to imply that maybe Dexter is absolutely actually alive. So I don't know. But if you like Dexter, there is a prequel series coming and there is a sequel series coming. I'm quite happy about that. I think the prequel series is going to be kind of interesting. Sequel series I'm less enthused about possibly, but I am sort of interested to see if they are going to bring him back from the dead or not. That was all the Dexter stuff. The Boys has a prequel series coming as well called The Boys Rising, and that stars Jensen Ackles and Aya Cash. So it's a twisted murder mystery about the origins of Vought in the 1950s and the early exploits of Soldier Boy and the diabolical maneuvers of the suit known to fans as Stormfront, but was then going by the name of Clara Vought. That's the prequel series. So obviously we've got Gen V. There is the main Boys, which has got one more season before that ends, and then we're going to have this prequel series. Jensen's fantastic in that role. He plays Soldier Boy brilliantly. Stormfront is a wonderful CG chewing character, so that should be great to have that. And I think it's going to be interesting seeing that world in the kind of 1950s as well. There was a Doctor Who panel, and the Doctor Who panel announced a new Doctor Who spin-off called The War Between the Land and Sea, announcing Russell Tovey and Gugu and Bath of Raw will be the two leads in that, alongside Gemma Redgrave and Alex Deverant, who are reprising their roles as Kate Lepridge-Stewart and Colonel Ibram from the main show. When a fearsome and ancient species emerges from the ocean, dramatically revealing themselves to humanity, an international crisis is triggered, and with the entire population at risk, a unit steps into action as the land and sea wage war. So that's the setup for that. It's an odd one. I sort of saw them maybe making a unit series. That sort of makes sense. But to make it specifically this, I thought was a slightly odd choice. You've got these other organisations, like you had Torchwood and you have Unit. They've done a Torchwood series. I can sort of see a Unit series working, but which I guess this sort of is. But to make it specifically about a specific event seemed like a slightly weird choice. But I mean, he's a great cast. So
it's got Russell Tovey in it. I'm in. I'm coming.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I love Russell Time. So, yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued to see it. But yes, that has been officially, I mean, that was the worst kept secret because they hadn't officially announced it and everybody knew it was coming. But they have officially confirmed that as well. So yes. What did you think of the last series of Doctor Who?
I really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad it got the good reviews that it had. I thought the last episode was really, really good, bringing it all together. I just, I can't wait for the next season, knowing that most of it is being filmed already. I'm a bit sad that we've lost Millie, but I believe that she's coming back in some way, shape or form as we move on to the next series.
Yeah, she is.
It seems such a weird arc for her only to have one season when they're actually... You didn't get much out of them because they spent a lot of the episodes apart. If you think about it, there were quite a few episodes where they were separated or just not really interacting, not getting to know much. And so when they sort of completed her arc and not sent her off, I was like, oh, this just seems a little bit of, they've got to bring her back. But I know she might only be a bit character or like a recurring character rather than a full character in the next season. So I'll be interested to see where it comes. So it's the first season I've really, really enjoyed since David Tennant.
Yeah. And we said before, actually, I mean, if you stop watching after David Tennant, this is quite a good place to start off with the sort of, the regeneration from Jodie into David Tennant, pick up there and just start watching again. Because I really enjoyed that series. I know there was a sort of hatchet job article that was done by Deadline of all people, which was saying, it might not have a future and, the numbers weren't what they wanted. It was like, well, look, if Disney drop out, which is a possibility, they'll just keep on making it, but with less money. That's all that will happen. It's got perfectly good numbers for the BBC. Disney don't have any direct control over the editorial of it, particularly. So I wouldn't worry about it. It was a really strong series. I think it did well. The numbers were good. I think it'll be fine. And I am very much looking forward to a second season of it. I agree with you with Millie, but she is definitely back in the next series, just not the whole of it. But that character will be coming back because they didn't entirely kind of explain her storyline. But they have said she is definitely back. So that's all the news we've got for this week. Just some highlights for next week on TV next. So, highlights for next week on TV. There was quite a lot of that actually kind of dropped on the 1st of August, like, Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, you got Unstable, Interview with the Vampire, Batman, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, but there's more stuff coming next week as well. Umbrella Academy turns for its 4th and final season. I think it's only 6 episodes. It's a shorter run, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they wrap that show. That's coming on the 8th of August on Netflix, so that will be back. Slip, which is a comedy we've mentioned on and off, that's coming finally to ITVX in the UK. This is a sort of interesting one about a woman that finds herself slipping through parallel universes via relationships. It looks like it's going to be very, very funny. I think it was a Roku series in the US, but going to be landing on ITVX over here. So 8th of August for Slip. That's worth checking out. Mallorca Files is back on Prime Video. That's for season 3. That's on the 8th of August as well. That's a British police officer joins forces with a German detective to fight crime in Mallorca. Cleaning Lady back for its 3rd season. As you mentioned, the first 2 seasons is basically a straight continuation from season 1 and season 2. 12th of August at 9 p.m. for that. Been really enjoying that series. And Solar Opposites is back for its 5th season. That's on the 12th of August on Disney+. I love this show so much, and I'm really looking forward to it being back. So, yeah, there is a trailer up for that 5th season, and it looks great. Coming back for a 6th as well. Just brilliant. So go and check that out on the 12th of August. I know you'll be watching Solar Opposites.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be watching Solar Opposites, Cleaning Lady, and I do want to see Slip as well, so that'll definitely be in my list.
Yes, be interested to know your thoughts on Slip, certainly, because I'm not sure if I'm going to get to it yet. So that's the highlights for next week on TV. There is a surprisingly large amount of TV around for August to go and check out. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Follow me on most social media, either at Gray the Geek or at Gray Panton. It's a little bit quiet to see lots of my running updates more than anything. I've been focusing on my fitness over the last couple of months. So there's loads of just my routes or me post-run looking sweaty. So not huge amounts of TV reviewing. But yeah, if you want to follow me or contact me or tell me which film to go and watch in my month of August, then do let me know.
Cool. So go and check Gray out there. For Matt, you can go and find him over on entertainmenttalk.org for lots and lots more podcasts. We are covering House of the Dragon over there, so there will be a final episode for the finale of that over on entertainmenttalk.org. I think we're going to be doing episodes for season 1 of Dead City and season 1 of Daryl Dixon as well at some point, so keep an eye out for those, but that's over on entertainmenttalk.org. And you can check out Daryl on Hollywood North News for all those TV series you love which are shot in Canada. For us, you can visit the website at geektown.co.uk throughout the week and see all the latest air date information. If you want to get in touch with your questions or comments, email us on podcast@geektown.co.uk. Leave a message on the website post. Find us at Geektown on Twitter, on Facebook at facebook.com/Geektown, on YouTube at youtube.com/Geektown, on Blue Sky at Geektown, on Instagram at Geektown UK, on TikTok at Geektown UK, and Threads at Geektown UK. That is everything. We shall see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow.